The interspecies diplomatic sanctuary of Vale Station had seen many things in its 11 years of operation. It had witnessed the signing of the Thornax Accord, the tearful reconciliation of the Vekari twin clans, and once, memorably, a Grothian ambassador accidentally sitting on a Dunny dignitary's ceremonial egg sack. That last incident had required 6 weeks of diplomatic repair and a formal apology fruit basket. But nothing, not one moment in 11 years, had prepared the room for what happened on the morning of Station Day 214. Mara Ellison had been a xenobiology caretaker for going on 7 years. She was 32, compact, brown-skinned, with a braid she kept wrapped twice around her head to stay out of her face during enclosure work. She smelled, perpetually, of the antiseptic foam used in the nursery wing and something warmer underneath, cedar and old tea and the faint biological residue of a dozen alien species she'd hand-raised from infancy. She was, by all professional assessments, exceptional at her job. She was also, by all personal assessments, terrifying to the other species on Vale Station, not because she was cruel or large or loud, but because she had absolutely no self-preservation reflex when it came to young animals. Any young animals. This had been noted in her file. Caretaker Ellison displays consistent disregard for standard precautionary distances when interacting with juvenile predator class specimens, the last annual review had read. Recommend mandatory sensitivity refresher. Again. Mara had read it, shrugged, and gone back to bottle feeding a Grothian cub with one hand while updating enclosure enrichment logs with the other. Kale Vera was not, technically, supposed to be in the diplomatic wing. He was 9 months old by Vekari reckoning, adolescent enough to move independently, young enough that the senior Vekari delegates still referred to him as Velketh, Little Teeth, with a fondness so fierce it edged into pain. He was the youngest son of High Delegate Sorvin Vera, brought aboard Vale Station as part of a growing Vekari tradition, showing their young ones the shape of the wider galaxy while they were still plastic enough to find it wondrous rather than threatening. He looked, to human eyes, like something between a snow leopard and a velociraptor that had decided to stand upright and wear a small ceremonial sash. He had silver-gray fur dappled with pale rosettes, retractable foreclaws, and eyes that were a deep, luminous amber, perpetually dilated with curiosity. He was, as his handlers had logged 17 times in the past week, very fast. Which was how he ended up in the corridor outside Diplomatic Suite 9 at 0900 station time, trailing 3 increasingly frantic Vekari attendants, and skidding to a stop directly in front of Mara Ellison. She was crouched in the hallway, of all things, resecuring a loose panel on the wall-mounted environmental sensor. Tool belt on her hip. A small smear of something blue-green on her left forearm, nutrient paste from the morning feeds. She didn't hear him approaching because Kale Vera, like all Vekari youth, moved without making sound when he was interested in something. She heard the Vekari attendants, though. Hard not to. They'd broken into a half-run, their formal robes rustling with the kind of urgent dignity that meant someone important was about to do something catastrophically undignified. Mara looked up. Kale looked down. He was perhaps half a meter from her face, head tilted at the precise angle that any xenobiologist would recognize as active appraisal. His nostrils flared. His ears, large and tufted, rotated forward independently. One forepaw lifted, hovered, set back down. The attendants had frozen in the corridor behind him. The 2 station staff who'd been walking past had also frozen. Someone, somewhere, had triggered a quiet alert. Mara heard the distant double tone that meant security, stand by, but don't escalate yet. The whole corridor held its breath. Kale Vera leaned forward and nipped the sleeve of Mara's uniform jacket. Not hard. The tiniest graze of very small, very sharp teeth, the Vekari adolescent equivalent of a hello, you are interesting, what are you? But it was enough to send a visible flinch through every non-human in the corridor. One attendant made a sound like a kettle encountering a personal crisis. Another took a half-step forward, hand raised toward the restraint tool at their belt. Mara looked down at her sleeve. Looked at Kale. pulled her arm back slowly, without jerking, without flinching, without making a single sound of alarm. And smiled. Not a nervous smile. Not the tight, controlled grimace of someone performing calm while internally screaming. A real one, the kind that reached her eyes, that creased the corners, that said, "Oh, you. I know exactly what you are." She held the eye contact for one beat, then broke it deliberately, glancing slightly to the side the way you did when you wanted to signal, "I am not a threat, I am not challenging you, I am just here." Then she reached into her tool belt, pulled out a small metal implement, a calibration stylus, blunt-ended, smooth, and set it on the floor between them. An offering. An exchange. "I hear, this is interesting, is this not interesting?" Cale stared at it. His ears did 3 separate things in rapid succession. He sat down. The attendant who'd reached for the restraint tool lowered their hand very slowly. The station staff in the corridor didn't move, but the quality of their not moving changed from bracing for catastrophe to watching something they didn't fully understand but felt was probably fine. The security double tone didn't escalate to a third. Cale Vera picked up the calibration stylus with both forepaws, turned it over twice, and then looked at Mara with an expression that, in any nursery class juvenile of any species she'd ever worked with, meant, "Are there more of these? What else have you got?" Mara made a low sound in the back of her throat, not a word, not quite, the kind of vocalization she'd learned to use in enclosures when language was too much and tone was everything. "I see you. I'm not worried. You're doing fine." One of the Vekari attendants finally moved. He crossed the corridor in short, careful steps and crouched at a respectful distance from both of them. "Caretaker," he said, very quietly. "You are uninjured?" "I'm fine." She didn't take her eyes off Cale, who had begun very gently attempting to use the stylus as a lever against the seam of the floor panel she'd been working on. "He was just saying hello." "He bit you?" "Grazed." She tilted her head toward the cub. "He barely touched it. He was being careful." The attendant was silent for a long moment. "He has done that to no one else since we boarded. The last time he approached a non-Vekari that closely, the individual in question fell backward over a decorative planter. The planter was probably threatening him." Mara finally looked up. "Is he eating well?" "He's at the age where they start to self-regulate intake and sometimes undersell hunger. His fur's got good sheen but his ears are slightly tacky at the base, which can be early dehydration." The attendant stared at her. "I do this for a living," she said, not unkindly. High Delegate Sorvin Vera received the incident report 40 minutes later and read it 3 times. The attached security footage showed his youngest son, sitting in a diplomatic station corridor, contentedly attempting to dismantle floor infrastructure with a borrowed tool, while a human female crouched a comfortable arm's length away and talked to his attendants with the unhurried calm of someone who had absolutely nowhere more important to be. Cale, in the footage, kept glancing at her. Not warily. The way young Vekari glanced at Pac. Sorvin watched the moment of the nip. Watched the human's arm pull back, slow, easy, no alarm, no recoil. Watched her smile. He called for his senior diplomatic attaché. "The human caretaker," he said. "Ellison. I want her assigned as Cale's primary contact for the duration of our stay." The attaché looked uncertain. "She's nursery staff, High Delegate." "Not protocol cleared for?" "Then clear her." He looked back at the footage. At the moment his son had chosen, out of a galaxy full of unfamiliar things, to say hello to this particular human, in this particular way. And she had answered correctly, in a language she hadn't been taught, without flinching. "I would like," Sorvin Vera said slowly, "to meet the species that raises people like this." In the corridor, Mara Ellison finally retrieved her calibration stylus, resecured the sensor panel, and stood up. Cale watched her go. At the last moment, he made a sound, low, buzzing, resonant. Inquiry and farewell folded into one. Mara paused in the corridor. Made the low sound back, just once. Then she walked on, braid swaying, tool belt rattling faintly, already thinking about the afternoon feeding schedule. Behind her, 3 Vekari attendants looked at each other. No one had words for it, quite. But the feeling in the corridor was something very close to, of course. Humans.